The first question has been asked by the Honorable J.S. Malema. The question is on the imposition of 30% duties of South African products by the President of the United States of America, Mr. DJ Trump, and the extent to which the government will react to these senseless tariffs and the impact that it expects to have on current and future diplomatic and trade relations with the United States. The Honorable the President, you are welcome and welcome to the podium to answer the question too.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker and honorable members. In answering the question that is imposed, I'd like to say that like many other countries around the world, our own country is facing the prospect of significantly higher tariffs to the exports that we make to the United States. Our government is therefore in continued engagement with the United States to secure what we would term a mutually beneficial trade and investment deal. The presidency and the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition have sent representatives who are currently in the United States, who are preparing for the further formal negotiations with the United States government, which should be taking place in just a few days. They are meeting a number of stakeholders as they are in both New York and Washington, including representatives of the administration, legislators, business people, and a whole number of other people. It should be known that many other countries are doing the same to secure agreements with the United States government. The US is South Africa's second largest trading partner as a country. Our economic relations are strong, and these relations go back many, many years. Trade between our two countries has historically been complementary in nature. We buy many goods and services from the United States, such as petroleum, aircraft and parts, medical instruments, soybeans, motor vehicles, poultry, and pharmaceuticals. South Africa exports to the United States include our minerals, our agricultural products, pharmaceuticals, motor vehicles, and medical isotopes. South Africa is the biggest investor from the African continent into the United States, with 22 of our companies investing in areas like mining, chemicals, pharmaceuticals, and food chains. More than 600 United States companies operate in South Africa through various investments. To advance our negotiation position, our government submitted a mutually beneficial trade and investment package on the basis of negotiations with the United States. This builds on the previous package, which was submitted on 20th of May, in addition to the proposal put to the United States. Cabinet has also endorsed our own country's economic package to assist our businesses. This includes measures that we are putting in place to support South African businesses that are affected by the tariffs. Government has decided that in response to the United States position on tariffs, South Africa should take this as an opportunity to diversify our export market platform for increased resilience and to facilitate the entry into alternative markets for affected exporters. As part of measures to assist companies to absorb the effects of tariffs and facilitate what I would call long-term resilience, the Localization Support Fund has made a commitment to support affected companies. We have initiated an export and competitiveness support program that will include working capital, plant and equipment facilities to address short to medium-term needs across all industries of those who are exporters. Working with industry, we are accelerating efforts to diversify export markets and enhance competitiveness to mitigate the economic impact of losing preferential trade access. A crucial part of this work is to make full use of the opportunities that are presented by the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. We're also looking at better using the buying power of local consumers, of businesses, and government to support local producers. South Africa is responding to the imposition of these tariffs by the United States by intensifying its own engagement with the US administration. We're working to stabilize diplomatic relations, and we are introducing a range of measures to make South African companies more resilient. We do believe that this is the best course we should take, and in a way it is double-pronged. We negotiate with the United States, but at the same time, we encourage our companies to use this as an opportunity to start seeking out other markets. And to enhance this, we're involved in various visits to other countries, trade missions, if you like. President, the deputy president, and ministers are scouring the world, going from place to place, country to country, seeking to open channels and markets for our South African products. Some areas we have not really fully exploited in the past, but we have now started doing so. A case in point, for instance, is Latin America. We have not, beyond just Brazil, gone full force into Latin America, and they are interested in dealing with us. Asia is also a huge market that is waiting. So is the Middle East. So this gives us a great opportunity to open up new markets, an opportunity that we are exploiting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll now ask for supplementary question from Honorable J.S. Malema, who's on virtual platform.
Thank you very much, Speaker. Mr. President, following Trump's tariffs on the country, our approach has been that of appeasement and almost tantamount to begging. You created an impression of us crawling on the floor and begging and cementing our place as a very junior partner to the US. You have juniorized this country and it has lost its status globally. We do this while countries such as China, Canada, and the EU announced retaliatory tariffs against the US. I know that we import finished products from US while we largely export our raw materials such as platinum, gold, and raw aluminium, all of which are central to the US economy. Instead of appeasing the maniac, why have we not stood firm and imposed own retaliatory tariffs against Trump while looking to open up trade with our BRICS partners and the rest of the countries of the global south? I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable President.
Thank you. Should I go? Thank you.
Yes, President, you can go on.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Yes, there are various options that countries can elect to respond to the unfair tariffs that have been leveled against, I would say, the world. A number of countries have sought to engage in negotiations with the US government. And some of those have been fairly large economies that are currently in negotiations with the United States. And we have chosen the route of engaging the United States. They said that they have a deficit, but we argue that they don't have a deficit, and that requires that we should actually sit down and negotiate these issues. And in sitting down, we've come to the conclusion that we will find good answers to be able to take matters forward. And let me say, our response has also been informed by engagement with our own private sector. Our own private sector as exporters, as well as importers, have been very much involved in crafting the response that we have offered to the United States, including the trade union movement. And it's all very well to say what we should have done is to retaliate. And in retaliation, you've got to be absolutely clear whether you will be able to achieve precisely what you need to achieve. We believe that we are on the right course, a course that should end up with a mutually beneficial outcome. The United States is our second largest trading partners, accounting for hundreds of thousands of workers who are employed here. The 600 US companies that are doing business in South Africa employ many people. And it is the interests of these many people that we as a government have to take care of before we engage in a war that may not yield the results that we want. So if one wants to play to the gallery, one could embark on the type of option that Honorable Malema is talking about without knowing what outcome that option will have. Our option is informed by what we want to gain. And what we want to gain is to continue exporting to the United States as much as possible and to enable our companies also to invest in the United States, but to also get United States companies to invest in us. And we do have leverage. And our leverage has to do with, yes, the natural resources that we have, the minerals that we have, which the United States needs. The discussions that we are having now with the United States also revolve around that. The critical minerals that South Africa has and the capacity that we have to process those minerals with the energy backing that we have, which many other countries don't have, is something that we take to the table and use as leverage. So I'd like to say that it is a strategy that we have opted for, and a strategy of engagement, and a strategy which we believe will yield results, notwithstanding the fact that we are obviously dealing with a United States administration that at times is unpredictable and that at times just retaliates. And without being supplicants, without, going on bended knee, which we have never done and which we will never do. And we have said we will not be bullied. We will stand as a sovereign country and negotiate and get the best deal for South Africa. That's precisely what we're doing.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Eso Armahumapilo.
Thank you very much, President, and we appreciate the extent to which strategic engagements are taking place with the U.S. on these tariffs. Now, the U.S. on its own, President, realizing that its trumpets of the tariffs are inflicting pain on them, they volunteered exclusion of some of the critical minerals from the initial list, which is an advantage for South Africa. So I want to check how, as South Africa, we can continue to deepen their own realization on the strategic tactical advantage that we have. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Yes. The issue, as I said earlier, of the strength and the endowments that we have, which is critical minerals, is a matter that is firmly on the table as we are having these engagements now with the United States. And we have been, yes, exporting these to them on a tariff-free basis, whilst they had offered us a tariff-free entry through the AGOA offering or process. So therefore, in order to gain the advantage that we need for our own country, we are utilizing precisely this aspect of what they need most. In the end, we are saying we need to balance the books. What do they need most from us is what we put on the table for them to consider. And what do we need most from them? And in balancing these two issues, we then believe that we will be able to come up with a fairly well-balanced negotiation that goes beyond just what they are focusing on, imposition of a 30% tariff regime on us. We go to the United States negotiating table with a strong hand. We don't go with a weak hand. And our endowments, as you correctly say, is exactly what we take to the table. And the ability on our part to have those products processed here. But we obviously, in doing so, want to take it a step further. And we want to be able, and that's what we are insisting on, that even as we may well want to export critical minerals, we want them to leave the shores of South Africa as finished products so that we beneficiate what we will finally sell to them. So that is the type of discussion that we are having with them, a proper engagement of two sovereign powers that are engaging for a fair deal outcome. And that is how we are proceeding with this now. Our people who are in the United States now are fully fired up with this type of approach, and the Minister of Trade and Industry and International Relations will be joining them, and they will be advancing those discussions. We are on the ground, and we are working the ground in the United States as we speak now. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, President. Mr. R. Smith.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Mr. President, as this question so rightly points out, a full spectrum of government responses is required to negotiate the best possible deal for South Africa in light of the USA's imposition of a 30% tariff on South African imports. Part of this response, which is your sole responsibility, is the appointment of a capable ambassador to represent our interests in Washington, D.C. Can you confirm to this House that South Africa's ambassador nominee to the United States of America will be a capable, skilled, and non-partial career diplomat and not another party political deployee?
Honorable President.
Yes. The appointment of South Africa's ambassador to the United States, which is soon to be finalized and made public, will be a person who is capable, a person who is sufficiently well experienced and sufficiently well versed in world views and world politics, and who knows the American market extremely well. That is the type of person that we are going to appoint. It's interesting that they themselves have over some time been mulling over who to deploy to South Africa. And indeed, we found that countries in these days, because the geopolitical situation has changed so much, are scratching their heads so much to find the most suitable people that they can deploy in various markets, and to get people with the necessary skills and know-how and experience and worldview. And that is the type of person that we are going to deploy to the United States as ambassador, as we also await them to bring their own, and as we also will be deploying a number of others to other markets and locales. So the answer to your question is yes, we will be appointing a well-versed and a well-rounded person who has the necessary skills. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm smiling. I saw members listening attentively, and I was wondering whether there may be some application here for such a position. Thank you very much, Mr. President. We'll now ask.
Madam Speaker, I must tell you that there have been a lot of applications, and some of them have come from this House.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Our last supplementary question will be asked by Honorable Maimane.
Thank you and good afternoon, Mr. President. All of us as South Africans observed your meeting in Washington and can fully appreciate the fact that we are now in the realm where domestic policy impacts foreign policy. A general goes off to Iran and makes some significant statements on foreign policy. That general has had a global implication on the US relation with those who it does not deem its allies, of which Iran is one. I want to ask, Mr. President, if you could bring the nation into confidence as to, in the light of all of these tariffs and our low GDP growth from today, whether does South Africa in fact have military cooperations with Iran? No sanction was taken against the general who has spoken. And ultimately, are you of the view that our close relations with Iran have had any impact on our tariff impositions by the US and what your government's plan to respond to that issue? Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President.
We do not have any military operations with Iran. Iran is one of the members of the BRICS. In fact, we held a BRICS summit yesterday online, and Iran was present, as were other countries like China, India, Ethiopia, Egypt, Brazil, and all others. So we are together members of BRICS, and in dealing with Iran, we deal with them also as a sovereign country that is dealing with the various issues and challenges as it is doing, like ourselves. And the general went to Iran on a determined visit, which was planned almost 2 years ago. And I had a long discussion with him, and we both agreed that the timing could have been managed differently. And he conceded that because of what is happening globally. And that in itself demonstrated to me, as he himself conceded, that the timing could have been different, and that what he said in Iran really was an expression of the continued relations that have existed between our two countries. And in the end, the relations we have no impact whatsoever, and should have no impact with our relations with other countries. And we respect and deeply respect the relations that other countries have with whoever in the world. And similarly, we say the same should obtain with us. There was a time when we were lambasted for even having any relationship with Russia, as it was involved in a war with Iran. And now of late, Honorable Maimani, nearly everyone comes to us and says, could you kindly impart a message to President Putin? And these are largely countries that had decided to shun Russia, to boycott Russia, and never want to have any discussions with them. And we've often said, do continue engaging with Russia. I remember very well when I went to the White House and met President Biden. And I said, do not disengage from talking to Russia, even as there is a conflict. And he said, can you please pass on a message to Russia, because you have historically had a relationship with Russia, because he said himself, we know that Russia was one of the only countries that supported your struggle as you were involved in a gigantic struggle against apartheid. I said, yes, they did support us, and we've continued to engage with them. And our engagement with them does not result in the abandonment of our own principles. We have principled, and they deal with us with great respect, with great honor, knowing very well that we are a sovereign state and we will not abandon our principles whatsoever. And now, many of them are then calling us and saying, can you please pass on this message to President Putin about the Ukrainian war so that we can find settlement? And this is done by nearly all of them. And these are countries that criticized South Africa very harshly when the Ukraine-Russia war started. Now of late, they become converts. They now come to us and ask us to pass on messages and to see how best we can work for peace. Now, the position we've always had is that we, in pursuing peaceful outcomes, will talk to all parties. We will talk to those who are belligerents in any conflict, and we will adhere to our principles, and our principles are to make peace, to make sure that there is peace in the world and all conflicts are resolved peacefully. So our standing as a country has been greatly enhanced, much as others say our standing has been dashed. It has actually been greatly enhanced, as many countries want to talk to us and see how best we can get involved in settling the variety of conflicts around the world. So the Iranian case is a case in point, and we've been very clear in our dealings that they are principled, and we will always adhere to our own principles and values and never abandon those. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. President. We are now moving to the second question, question 14, that has been asked by Honorable M. Ntuli. Honorable Ntuli, unfortunately, has a family engagement and is not here physically, and has asked Honorable Mpapane to take the question on his behalf. The question is considering his State of the Nation address on 9 February 2023, in which he emphasized the creation of a state bank, which entails licensing the Postbank. What measures is the government taking to support the Postbank in acquiring its full commercial banking license, and whether the government has established the need to capitalize the Postbank to ensure its commercial viability? Honorable President.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Driving financial inclusion remains a national priority for us. When more South Africans, especially the South Africans who live in the rural areas and underserved communities, are able to access affordable banking and credit, we unlock entrepreneurship, support job creation, and stimulate growth in local communities. Now, financial inclusion also empowers youth and women-owned enterprises, but it also narrows inequality and builds resilience in households and communities as well. South Africa has a well-developed and competitive financial services sector. And in fact, one can say almost second to none on our continent. And it is one of those great attributes that investors also look out for to distinguish our market from many others. Our commercial banks, development finance institutions, cooperative banks, and new digital entrants all provide a range of financial products and services to small businesses and individuals. But of course, we want much, much more access by our people, particularly your small, medium enterprises, to have easy access to finance from these institutions. The Postbank Amendment Act was enacted to strengthen the diversity of our financial sector and to ensure a dedicated focus on underserved communities. The act was meant to establish a Postbank as a developmental state-owned commercial bank offering accessible financial services to all South Africans, but more particularly to South Africans who live in the rural areas. Whilst obtaining a banking license is an independent regulatory process, the Minister of Communications and Digital Technologies, as the representative shareholder and executive authority of the Postbank on behalf of our government, is tasked with ensuring that the Postbank receives the necessary support to obtain the banking license. Now, according to the minister, the Postbank has not yet fully met the conditions for a banking license, particularly around its card key management processes and the compliance with the prudential standards that are required. Its immediate challenge is to strengthen its governance to ensure compliance with prudential standards and to stabilize its own finances. Capitalization of the bank will be considered, as it must, once the Postbank is granted authorization to operate as a bank, after which it has 12 months to raise the funding to become a registered bank. This will be determined by its business case, for which the Postbank board is responsible, and submitting the business case to government via the Minister of Communications and Digital Technologies. Now, these steps, Madam Speaker, are essential to ensure that the Postbank obtains its banking license and is able to fulfill the vital mandate that it bears to promote financial inclusion for all. Now, I am sure and certain that these requirements should be met and will be met, and all that we need to focus on is the time frame through which the bank itself will be able to meet all these requirements. Now, I know that the board is at work to address all these matters, and as it is a financial services institution, the requirements are quite stringent. They are stringent because the Prudential Authority wants to protect the public when it comes to their money. And so therefore, those standards have been well set out, and it is now incumbent on the minister as well as on the bank to ensure that they meet all these standards. And once these standards are met, then the bank will be able to offer all the services as a registered entity. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. President. Honorable D. Mpapane.
Thank you very much, Honorable President, for the comprehensive response to this question. One of the measures that has enabled the Postbank to obtain exemption in terms of the Banks Act to implement its commercial strategy and ensure its viability in the interim is the Master's Service Agreement with SASSA for the payment of social and SRD grants to beneficiaries. The Department of Social Development and SASSA has indicated that they will terminate the MSA agreement. The effect of losing the master service agreement with SASSA could place the bank at risk of insolvency and possibly going under liquidation, which could see the bank retrenching over 250 employees and not obtaining its full commercial license. What is government doing to avert the risks that are associated with this, with the termination of this agreement? Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable President.
Now, according to SASSA, the agreement it had with the Postbank no longer serves any purpose. And that is why that agreement is to be terminated. It is said that since the termination of cash pay points and other over-the-counter services at the post office, and the removal of the post office as a recognized grant payment channel, the agreement is no longer relevant. The department is, however, in discussions, and this has involved a multi-departmental type of discussion to try and forestall this whole fallout. In the end, your SASSA beneficiaries will not be affected because they will continue with their own accounts. But the operation of the post office itself is what is currently under discussion to ensure that we forestall the total collapse of the post office. Now, indeed, the Postbank has to meet a number of requirements, and we have said that these should be met on an urgent basis so that we can see how best we begin to address the whole issue of capitalization. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Maoto.
I will take the question. Thank you very much, Speaker. President, in terms of the statement released by the South African Reserve Bank on the 25th August, we know that the Postbank is still a designated clearing system participant and not a fully fledged bank. Yes, we've heard you that we're in the process of establishing it as a fully fledged bank. But in 2018, we introduced a bank amendment bill in terms of which we proposed that the bank should be a fully fledged state bank. Further, we proposed that the public service bank be established using the asset base of the African Bank, which is largely owned by the South African Reserve Bank and the GPF. While your party rejected the bill back then, and given your belated delays of the bank, of the state bank, would you be in support of the sort of the interventions we proposed in the bank's amendment bill today in order to boost the capacity of the state to facilitate ease of banking and give it trust for the state-led banking services that prioritize development? Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable President.
Thank you. The issue of a state bank has been a topic of great discussion amongst all of us. And there is general agreement that there should be a state bank. The whole question is really how do we then move forward to put it together? And how do we put all the key elements, whether they reside in the Postbank or whether the African Bank could be part of them, And we should remember that the African Bank has other shareholders who are not state entity parties, who are like your commercial banks. So all those entities now need to be properly synchronized to ensure that we do utilize whatever assets that there are to create a state bank. I do think that we have moved quite considerably closer to what we could finally emerge as a state bank. Of course, the key question is going to be capitalization, and if current assets that reside elsewhere can be put together and with whatever input the government can make to set up a state bank, that will be the ideal outcome. So in the end, I do believe that a state bank is no longer a question of whether it will be set up or not. It is really the mechanics of how we go about setting up the state bank. That it will be done, in my view, is a foregone conclusion. It will be done. How we go about it and how quickly we move to set it up is the critical question. And it is a question that I believe is being addressed both by Treasury, by the central bank, and also a number of other entities as well as ministries. So a state bank is something that is going to happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Honorable MC Mafakane.
Mr. President, Postbank requires about 7 billion to recapitalize and has no intention to privatize. It has gone 3 times to the National Treasury for help to capitalize. These requests were rejected. Considering that ministers sign performance agreements and are accountable to you, Mr. President, does your failure to ensure the capitalization of Postbank represent a failure to anticipate at the signing into the law, the state bank, the risk factor associated with the viability of the state bank? When this decision, like many others, is not implemented, will you say that you are shocked and call for the citizens to provide an answer and solution as you normally do?
Thank you, Honorable President.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I like your laughter on this. You know, when somebody laughs the way you're laughing, they know they are not telling the truth. But let me answer you directly. I am not shocked. Point number 1, I am not shocked. Point number 2, I am not asking South Africans to provide the answer. Now, once we've cleared those 2 questions, I should say that capitalization of the Postbank is something that needs to be handled with the necessary care. Firstly, the fiscal challenges that we face are enormous. We don't have easy money lying around, but at the same time, what I said in my reply...
Honorable Klute, can you please switch off your mic?
What I said in my reply in chief was that there are quite a number of conditions that have to be met. Now, I should say that the progress that is being made in moving towards getting the Postbank to become a properly registered bank is actually quite encouraging, because now there's a clear roadmap. And the roadmap is, from a governance point of view, the board must ensure that everything is well aligned themselves as the people who are responsible for governance. And at the same time, they need to look at the financial viability of the bank itself. And once all that has been done, we will then be able to move to the whole question of capitalization and then determine how that capitalization should happen. And it is then that the minister will come to this house and propose a capitalization amount and where the money should come from. That we want to move towards setting up the Postbank as a registered bank is a given. And all we need to do is to ensure that all these other matters that are regulatory, that have to do with governance, and that have to do with financial prudency are all attended to. Remembering that the Postbank in the end is going to be managing public money. And we therefore ourselves need to be absolutely certain that this bank will operate in terms of the laws, in terms of the regulations that we have that govern banking in South Africa. So I do hope and I do believe that that will happen. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, President. Honorable Abrams.
Mr. President, last year the Postbank was looted of 100 million rand of taxpayers' money. This after the Reserve Bank repeatedly warned of security vulnerabilities. This perpetuates the trust deficit between South Africans and government. Can the President tell South Africans why a state-owned bank will not become yet another VBS looting scheme? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
The VBS saga has taught us a lot of lessons. There's a great desire amongst South Africans to have a state-owned financial services. And we know that those state-owned financial services will operate with a greater sensitivity to serve the interests of South Africans from a financial point of view. But at the same time, those entities need to operate in accordance with our very stringent financial regulatory framework. And the VBS, as you might recall, was not yet a registered financial institution. And that is why the type of mishap happened in the VBS. What we are seeking to do now is to forestall, to make sure that what happened, for instance, in VBS does not happen. And sometimes it becomes very frustrating for many of us that the government is not moving forward to set up these entities. And the frustration is something I can understand, but we must also understand that we've got to be absolutely careful because this is about managing public money. If you talk to any banker today, they will tell you that the regulatory framework in which they have to operate is governed by so many laws that keep them straight on the narrow path that make them be very careful in managing the money that comes from the public. So the assurances that one can give would be adherence to regulations and to the watchful eye of the Prudential Authority, which is part of the South African Reserve Bank, who watch every bank so closely. And they watch it so closely to a point where no one can serve as a director of a bank without being approved by the Reserve Bank. And the whole process of scrutiny, of ensuring that everybody who serves on a bank is a proper person, is quite stringent. And we need to thank them for that. And that is why our financial services architecture is so well respected in the world. So when the Postbank finally gets that license, it will join that league of well-regulated bodies and well-managed bodies to ensure that things like fraud and the disappearance of money does not happen willy-nilly. So we should trust our regulatory framework and know that once we accede to that level of approval, a lot will be much better and safer. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, President. We now move to the third question coming from Honorable G. Bichalakis, the Chief Whip of the DA. The question is about whether the national dialogue is intended to assist the government to achieve its priorities of economic growth, poverty reduction, job creation, lowering the cost of living and building a capable state. If not, what is the position in this regard? If so, what are the relevant details? Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. The outcomes of the national dialogue will in the end be determined by the citizens of our country. They are not going to be determined by the president, nor any one of us sitting here. National dialogue should be seen as a structured process where the citizens of our country, together with political actors, civil society, and other stakeholders, come together to deliberate on the future of their own country, to debate on the South Africa they want. Its importance, therefore, lies in several interconnected dimensions. The national dialogue is aimed at giving ordinary South Africans a voice to articulate precisely the South Africa that they wish to have and how they participate in crafting the solutions for the country. Now, crafting the solutions sometimes is seen as privy for the leadership. And that is why when I addressed the national dialogue, I asked the people of South Africa a number of questions that they should also participate in answering. And a wave of criticism has come my way when I sought to elicit real participation so that as South Africans, we must ask ourselves those very important questions. And we must, yes, as ordinary South Africans must ask, why does the tap not have water? They must ask us as their public representatives because the taps don't have water in many places. And they must, no. They must then say, you know,
Order, honorable members.
the taps don't have water because there is either corruption, there are water tanks, and we see it in our own communities, and be able to point out exactly what is happening on the ground themselves. Now, that is the opportunity that South Africans are going to be having or given to address these issues. Now, over the next few months, South Africans from across the length and the breadth of the country will be engaging in conversations on the issues that concern them deeply. The first National Convention, which was held from the 15th to the 16th of August at UNISA, was attended by over 1,000 delegates representing more than 200 organizations. Now, that was quite a crowd of people, not Mickey Mouse at all. The convention brought together around 30 different sectors in society, ranging from business to labor to traditional leaders and faith-based organizations. There were organizations of women, youth, students, academics, emerging businesses and older persons, military veterans, persons with disabilities, and unemployed persons.
Order, Mr. President, if you can take a seat. Advise there's the question on the platform. Honorable Skosana, what is your question?
Ngiyabonga kakhulu Mgcinihlalo somlomo
Is it a point of order?
Ngithi-ke, point of order, the president is misleading the House.
Honorable member, under which rule are you raising your point of order?
Rule number 85.
No, honorable member. Can you please close your mic so that we can continue? Thank you, Honorable President.
I was enjoying the rest. Honorable Speaker, also among the represented organizations were people in the media, in sports, arts and culture, justice, peace, governance, democracy, and human rights. That was the collection of people who were at the National Convention. In many ways, the National Convention reflected the broad and vibrant diversity of our society. Whether people like it or not, that was the reality that was represented at the National Dialogue, at the convention rather. The first convention was a great success by any country, where delegates endorsed the need for the value of a national dialogue. The convention agreed on key themes for the national dialogue, understanding that citizens will be able to raise any issues that they want. The 9 broad themes that were identified were building a dynamic, inclusive economy that will create jobs and improve livelihoods, tackling crime and corruption, winning the future through education and a healthy nation, fixing the state and making the constitution work for our people, building South African values, culture, and strengthening our social fabric, advancing gender equality and ending gender-based violence and femicide, dealing with intergenerational trauma and healing, promoting environmental justice, advancing land and mineral rights. Now, delegates to the first National Convention expressed their support for a representative steering committee to drive the national dialogue process. Now, over the next 3 weeks, organizations involved in the 32 identified sectors have been meeting amongst themselves to nominate their own representatives to the steering committee. Now, these nominations will now be compiled and collated by the eminent persons group to ensure inclusivity and representativity before the steering committee is constituted. Once established, the steering committee will work together with the interministerial committee chaired by the deputy president and with the advice of the eminent persons group to coordinate public dialogues across the country. And let us be clear, the steering committee will be led by the citizens of our country, giving credence to our intention that this must be citizen-led, whilst government's role is that only of a facilitator. The purpose of the dialogue that will take place at local level and within various sectors is to develop sustainable and effective responses to the challenges that the country faces. It is expected that this process will result in the social compact that we all yearn for, that outlines the roles, the responsibilities of each sector of society in building the South African nation. Now, while South Africans still have to have their say, it can be anticipated that the national dialogue will make a significant contribution to economic growth, to poverty reduction, to job creation, lowering the cost of living, and building a capable state, the very priorities that we outlined over and over again in this House. Now, citizens feel ownership over national decisions when they are directly themselves involved in shaping them, complementing the important role that is played by elected representatives. Involving the people directly enhances the process of developing a shared vision for the country of our future. Now, what happened? What happened when the National Convention was held was quite a moving process where we had so many South Africans expressing a deep yearning to be in conversation with each other. And it is something that we should never dismiss out of hand. And it is not something that can be called a misnomer. It is something that happened, and that is going to lead to the holding of a national dialogue through the length and the breadth of the country. And if one just looks at the number of organizations that were represented, they represent the entirety of our society in South Africa, of our citizenry. So let us give this whole process a chance, an opportunity to progress rather than stand on the sidelines and criticize. And as they say, it's better to be inside the tent rather than to be outside and doing something inside the tent. So let us all be in this national dialogue tent. It is almost like a caravan. It is moving. And we call on everyone to be part of it. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, President. Honorable Michalakis.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Mr. President, the national dialogue is a failure no matter how you sell it. Now, listen, the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, Steve Biko Foundation, Chief Albert Luthuli Foundation, Desmond and Leah Tutu Foundation, F.W. de Klerk Foundation, Oliver and Adelaide Tambo Foundation, and the Strategic Dialogue Group, and many others withdrew. Mr. President, how do you plan to get the entire country behind what results from it if you couldn't even get the entire country in the room to begin with?
Thank you, Honorable President.
Now, I do not want to get into the politics of who withdrew and who stayed in, because if I get involved in that, and let me just say this is not the president's dialogue. The people of South Africa called for the dialogue. And then they said it has to be convened for the first meeting by the president, because embedded in our constitution, there is that notion that when we talk about nation building, it is the president who should lead the process. Now, as often happens.
Order, honorable members, can we lower our voices?
Now, as often happens, and you're talking here to somebody who was unfortunately involved in a number of other dialogues. You know, we had the peace process in our country when the country was dogged with a lot of violence. A number of South Africans got together and said we should have a peace summit. And when that was held, a number of other people did not participate. But a peace pact was framed, and it helped to bring down the levels of violence in the country. When we were moving forward to democratize our country, I remember very clearly we held a convention for a democratic future, which brought together a number of organizations. Many others did not participate. That Convention for a Democratic Future helped to craft the path towards negotiations. When the multi-party negotiations happened, starting with CODESA, a number of other entities that did not participate but it still resulted in the caravan moving forward. When the multi-party negotiations happened for a new constitution, a number of parties did not participate. And these were parties of great weight, of real big influence. They didn't participate, but the caravan moved on and finally produced the constitution that we now have. And the process of drafting that constitution was so broad and so inclusive. The drafters went throughout the country to involve a number of South African citizens. So it often happens, we're experienced with this, that when national processes happen, there will be those who will decry that they have not been included, and there will be those who say this is irrelevant, and there will be those who say we don't want to participate, but the majority always participate and they move the process forward. So in this case, I am hopeful, much as, truth be told, much as I now have nothing to do with the dialogue, because the dialogue is now being led by a steering committee of which I am not a member. This dialogue is now going to be taken forward by those people who believe that this process should be theirs. And all we will do as government will play a supportive role of financing their various activities. And in many ways, that caravan is going to move on, whether people like it or not. And those who may have an inclination to now want to be part of it and join in, I'm told that they will always find the door open. And the caravan will stop for a while to allow them to climb on, and then it will continue moving on. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable President. Honorable members on the virtual platform, really, please help us to make sure that we move with the process of the question and not disadvantage other members who still have their questions. And I think it is important that we note that let's not be disruptive. Can I ask Honorable Ismail Musa? Order, honorable members.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. His Excellency, the Honorable President Cyril Ramaphosa, thank you so much for the opportunity. Considering the widespread public perception of a lack of trust at grassroots level in government, and noting that NGOs and civil society organizations are playing a pivotal role in supporting communities where government capacity falls short, it is concerning that their pivotal role was not adequately prior engaged, recognized, or included in the national dialogue. So may I ask you, Honorable President, does the national dialogue intend to broaden its engagements to meaningfully include grassroots and civil society organizations at its top structures so that the process is more adequately and genuinely people-driven? In the interest of our South African citizens, given the urgent realities faced by millions of South Africans...
Thank you. Your time is up, Honorable Member. I'm sure the President had picked up at least one question that you asked. Honorable President.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. As I am no longer involved in the whole process of the national dialogue, I'm told that one of the key principles that the National Dialogue Steering Committee will seek to adhere to is inclusivity, to make sure that as many organizations as possible at grassroots level, the rural areas and the urban areas, that will be organized according to sectors, do participate. And already I'm told that those sectors are meeting as we speak. They are finalizing as sectors their own representatives, be it in the sporting fraternity and even its subsectors. It could be rugby, it could be football, it could be tennis, it could be whatever, and various others. Could be traditional leaders, it could be all other sectors. It could be medical, it could be legal. They will all be meeting right now and identifying those who can be selected to come onto the steering committee. I do believe that it might well be a fairly large steering committee that will seek to be representative of the people of South Africa, of various sectors to which our people coalesce around. So the fear that others will be excluded should really be waylaid, because in the end, we want this dialogue process to be as inclusive as possible, and it must be people-driven. It must be driven right from the grassroots level. And people must be able to speak out their own minds. I envisage that in the end, we will have even, and this is what I am going to be calling for and encouraging, that we should even have at universities level, at school level, national dialogue days where young people come together and discuss precisely what South Africa they want to inherit going forward. They themselves must have those types of discussions. And I do believe that the steering committee will organize that so that there should be a day in which people collectively throughout the country get together and have a discussion. We should have school governing bodies getting together as well and talking about the type of education system they want to see. And all this, including the questions that I raised, are matters that South Africans should be talking about and should be crafting solutions around. It must be a people-driven process, not a top-down type of process. It must be from bottom right to the top. That is how inclusivity in the end will be achieved. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable President. Honorable Reverend Misha.
Thank you, Speaker. Dumela mo Presidente. It is concerning that calls for the postponement of the national dialogue made by the 7 legacy foundations who ultimately withdrew from the National Convention Task Team have gone unheeded. The foundations raised concerns that core principles of the dialogue have been violated, yet these concerns have not been addressed. They cited the erosion of citizens' leadership, a lack of financial and operational infrastructure, and the absence of an approved budget allocation as some of the reasons for their withdrawal. If the running of the national dialogue is to be transparent, as transparency was initially one of the core principles, which line items were removed from the planned expenditure that enabled the initial cost of the national dialogue to be cut from 700 million rands to the estimated 441 million rands. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. The decision to go ahead with a national dialogue and the decision for me to, as it was planned, to convene it was a collective decision. It was not one person's decision. It was a decision that was taken collectively with the eminent persons group and those who were involved initially from the organizing, the task team, who now mutated to become the organizing committee. Now, the issues that were raised were we are not quite ready. The documentation has not yet been properly printed, and we don't know how the finances will be managed and all that. So those were the reasons. And the counter reasons that were then put forward is that the invitations have already gone out. Various organizations are responding. There are going to be more than 1,000 people who are coming. Arrangements have already been made. Bookings have already been done for transport, for accommodation, and what have you. The preparations for documentation can be solved fairly quickly. The issue of the budget was not really the key issue in the end. The key issue for me, and I must put my hand in this, was that the budget that had been drafted was 740 million. And I said, what will we be doing with 740 million? And it came out that some of the money would be utilized for booking people in expensive accommodation, booking meeting halls. And I said, but is that really necessary? When our people meet at ward level, they will always find places to meet, like we do with our Stockfells, with our prayer groups, with our whatever. People always find places on a free basis to meet. Why do we budget so much money for holding of such manifestations? And I then directed that that budget should be brought down substantially. Even on the National Convention, when I looked at the budget, and I do look at these things, when I looked at the budget and found that the charging for the hotel and all that were so high, I said, no, we are government. As government, we operate on economies of scale. We can bring prices down, go back and ask for bigger discounts. This is precisely what they did. And it did bring that budget down. Now, the good thing was that the finances are being managed by NEDLEC. Treasury allocates money to NEDLEC. NEDLEC, which is a state organization, manages that, and it plays the role of the secretariat. And that, for me, is very comforting, to ensure that what people feared, that money will disappear, should, to a large extent, be curtailed, and that we should keep a hawk's eye on how the money is utilized. Now, those were some of the concerns, but in the end, Honorable Mishwe, the decision that was taken was a collective one, that we go at. If we stop having invited people, it might be very difficult 2, 3, 4 months later to bring them in. The principle of getting this to be a people-oriented process is not true. It's very false. Because in the end, Reverend Mishwe, if you were there, the whole dialogue, the whole convention was being run not by a single government person. It was being run by civil society, people from organizations. And I kept asking, who is this one? Who is this one? Because I didn't know them. And to me, that was a joy that we've got people who are not the known names who are running. The deputy president was not the chairperson of the dialogue. And we had no minister who was the chairperson of the dialogue. It was ordinary South Africans. And that whole process is now going to be transposed to how it happens at the local level. And I have insisted that from government point of view, it must be hands off. Hands off. The only time we will need to get involved is to delineate the money and to make sure that the money process is being well handled through NEDLAC. So government hands off, our people are in charge, and I trust our people to deliver the product that the people of South Africa need. And that is why the dialogue then went on. And let me add, Reverend Mishwe, the eminent persons group delegation was there. Most of them were there. Bishop Lekhanyane was there. He sat throughout the process. And the various other leaders of the EPG, they were there. And they were overseeing and also hands off as it was being directed by ordinary people. So I derived a lot of joy, and I'm waiting for the report that you too will get. So key hands off government, key hands on our people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President. Honorable Dr. C.P. Mulder.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable President, I will want to make 3 quick points and then a question. The first point I would like to make is you refer to the questions that you've asked during the convention. And I think South Africans did not ask the questions because they know the answers. They expected the president to reply and to say why these things are there and why they were not differently. The second point I would like to make is I think it's common cause that the majority of South Africans were not represented. If you purely look at the parties represented in Parliament who did not participate in terms of their support, it's quite clear, never mind trade unions, that the majority were not represented. And lastly, the problem with regard to the outcomes that you referred to, I'm not aware that any decisions were taken at the convention. My question is the following. The original question dealt with possible outcomes, and it referred specifically to economic growth, job creation, etc. And we have had some interaction.
Thank you, Honorable Mulder. Your time is up.
The question I would like
Honorable
to ask
Mulder,
is this. You've made it very clear on behalf of the presidency, but also your
Honorable Mulder,
that you are not going to support those
can you
kind of
please
amendments.
switch off your
If the
mic?
dialogue comes out and says these things should be done, will your government implement those changes?
Honorable
Thank you.
Mulder, we didn't hear most of your question.
Madam, I switched off my mic a long time ago.
IT, can you please switch off Honorable Mulder?
I have switched it off.
Mr. President, you can answer a question you had because it was very difficult.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. It was very difficult to hear, and whatever I might answer might not entirely answer the questions that he might have had. But to the extent that I had, Honorable Mulder seems to be saying that the majority of parties represented in Parliament are not participating in the dialogue. That may well be so, but there are some parties that are in Parliament that are represented in the whole process of the national dialogue. And as I said earlier, at times when we hold national manifestations, there are those who choose not to participate. And I think, past just begging them to participate, we can never, as the English say, take a horse to the river and force it to drink. And I'm expecting that with time, as they see this process unfolding, they may well want to participate. But in the end, the value of South Africans talking to each other, and let me be clear, let me be very clear, it is South Africans who will be talking to each other, meeting at ward level, where even our voters, the people who voted for us, are represented. So they will be talking, and they will not even be, cajoled not to talk. They will opt to go to those meetings and participate. So it is to the detriment of us who are sitting here to say, no, we are not going to participate because of this and this and that. I referred to this with regard to the Pan-Africanist Congress. Their message to me was quite heartwarming, because the president of their Pan-Africanist Congress came to me and said, Mr. President, we as the PAC have always shunned and stayed away from various national manifestations. And we now realize that with our absence, our voice was not heard. And now we want to be there because we want our voice as the PAC to be heard. And I took that to heart and I said, that is precisely what the South African response should be, that we should participate. Because you know what? Your own members, your own voters are going to participate at grassroots level. They are going to go to those ward meetings, unless, of course, as a party, you issue a directive that do not participate. And maybe all you should ever say is that if you see the president in any of those, don't go. I promise you, I'm not going to be there, so they should go. So I do hope that various parties will find their way clear, and those who are staying out will find their way clear to participate. This is a serious citizen-led process. Our people want to participate. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. President. The next question is question 16 and has been asked by the Honorable Modise Mpeya. The question is, given that the Republic is preparing for the G20 summit in November 2025 in Johannesburg, what has been the assessment so far of South Africa's G20 presidency in line with the theme of solidarity, equity, and sustainability? Mr. President, before you proceed, Honorable Skosana, was that a point of order?
No, it's a point of privilege.
No. Honorable Skosana, we are now busy with the questions. Honorable President, please proceed.
Honorable Deputy Speaker, South Africa's G20 presidency under the theme Solidarity, Equality and Sustainability has received strong support from G20 members, also strong support from invited countries that are not members of the G20, whom we have chosen to invite, particularly those who are on our continent and immediate neighbors to us, as well as receiving great support from international organizations. South Africa's G20 presidency has entered its final 90 days. Approximately 87 of the 132 official meetings on the G20 calendar have already taken place. You might have seen some of these meetings taking place in various parts of our country. And I must immediately say that they've all been well organized, well run. And in this regard, we really thank our provinces. Our provinces have come out in the strongest way to be hosts of these various G20 meetings that have been held from as far afield to the Kruger National Park, to the Eastern Cape, Northwest, all over, in fact, all over the country, these meetings have taken place. So we thank also the people of South Africa for being great hosts themselves, because they have, in a number of ways, interfaced with the G20 colleagues who have come to our shores. And a number of these meetings have resulted in people who didn't know our country falling in love with our country and saying they will return on a holiday and they will come and see our country more closely. Now, these meetings address some of the most urgent and significant challenges facing the global community, demonstrating our firm commitment to finding sustainable and innovative solutions through dialogue, through collaboration, and through cooperation as well. The ongoing G20 discussions aim to advance, in the end, South Africa's overarching priorities. Now, these priorities are to strengthen disaster resilience and response. And we chose this because of the experience that we keep on having with regard to disasters. Year in and year out, 3 of our provinces continue to be befallen by terrible disasters that damage infrastructure, damage living abodes, and leading to loss of life and loss of assets and loss of livelihoods. And we want the G20 to address this. We also have wanted the G20 to address debt sustainability for low-income countries. Many of the low-income countries in the world suffer under the burden of heavy debt. And we wanted to mobilize finance for a just energy transition and also to harness critical minerals for inclusive growth and sustainable development. Those have been our clear objectives under the rubric of the themes that we have chosen: equality, sustainability, and solidarity. And for us to bring to the fore the concept of solidarity has been very important, particularly in the light of what is happening in the world. We are calling for solidarity, and it has demonstrated its sharp end through a number of countries now coming to the fore on a matter where we were so heavily criticized when we chose to support the struggle of the Palestinians, and where we said we are going to support them. We will, yes, take another country to the ICJ to stop, underline, to stop the atrocities that are happening there. A number of countries are now coming forward to express solidarity, and in many ways inspired by the position that we took, that solidarity is still an important value in the world, that we need to pledge solidarity with those who are suffering and those who are being horribly treated. So we are rather pleased that much as our theme was so heavily criticized, particularly from the global north, when they said a theme like diversity, inclusivity, and equality and equity should not even see the light of day in, say, the G20. We've forged ahead, and it's now being broadly accepted. South Africa is also championing broader and cross-cutting issues on all G20 working groups. Now, these include reform of the multilateral trading system and the international financing architecture, including strengthening of multinational development banks. While there is divergence on some issues, as is expected in multilateral engagements, there is support and strong support for that matter for South Africa's priorities among G20 members. Negotiations on the G20 Working Group ministerial declarations and outcomes are currently underway. You will recall that at the end of the G20, we need to have a declaration which in the main will be drafted by all participants, a declaration which South Africa is going to pilot to ensure that South African G20 declaration becomes the accepted outcome that will unite the world, or the G20. Most of the last round of ministerial meetings will be held in September and October, ahead of the Leaders' Summit, which will be held in November. Now, significant progress has been made, and a milestone was achieved with the holding of the third meeting of the G20 finance ministers and central bank governors in July 2025. Remembering that the G20 process really got started to address the financial crisis that the world faced some years ago. The meeting outcomes were agreed in a communique consented to by all parties. The meeting delivered productive and constructive discussions on Africa, the global economic outlook and the macroeconomic stability, the international financial architecture, sustainable finance and global health, infrastructure, tax, financial sector issues, and financial inclusion. Now, these to us were a milestone because to have gotten the ministerial meeting, which involved Reserve Bank governors and ministers of Treasury, to finally reach consensus and all this was really, in my view, the heart of what the G20 South Africa is going to mean. On the 29th of August, we launched the G20 Extraordinary Committee of Independent Experts on Global Wealth Inequality. And this was a South African initiative. The panel is being chaired by the Nobel laureate, Professor Joseph Stiglitz. This initiative seeks to heighten global attention on inequality and outline practical action to address growing disparities in income, wealth, and opportunity. Our former Minister of Trade, Industry, and Competition, former Minister Ibrahim Patel, is going to Washington just a day from now to go and interact with Professor Joseph Stiglitz on precisely the issues that we've asked him to chair our committee on. The outcomes of the G20 ministerial meetings will form a key part of the G20 Leaders Declaration, which will be adopted at the G20 summit in Johannesburg in November. South Africa aims to produce an ambitious Leaders Declaration that will promote the development agenda of the Global South in general and the African continent in particular. So all in all, Madam Deputy Speaker, a great deal has been achieved. We are way beyond the halfway mark. We are now on the final stretch of the G20 South Africa's presidency. And so far, it's been really good. The discussions have been rich, they've been robust, and they've been well organized, which in many ways is a great feather on the hat of South Africa, that we've been able to hold these meetings without too much angst, without too much differences, but getting various countries to coalesce. Even those countries that initially boycotted some of the meetings, and this is the thing about boycotting meetings, even those that boycotted, they found that the meetings continue. The caravan moves on. The caravan did not stop. And when they wanted to come and attend, the caravan was stopped to enable them to come and attend. And they got on the caravan, and the caravan is moving on. That is what is happening.
First supplementary question will be asked by the Honourable Modise Mpaya.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Honourable President, as the African National Congress, we are encouraged and confident that the hosting of G20 brings global attention and will help attract foreign direct investment and will create opportunities in various sectors, as you have expressed. However, a lot of our people are uncertain and are asking the questions of how will the G20, as hosted by South Africa in 2025, benefit an ordinary persons on the streets, as well as help improve our economy and ensure that some of the opportunities created can be sustainable even beyond the event.
The Honourable President.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Speaker. And of course, as we hold these big manifestations, everyone wants to see of what benefit is this going to be to us, and particularly at the individual level. The benefits are not something that will eventuate immediately. What this does do, though, particularly when it comes to the themes that we have identified and the priorities, these are processes that will finally turn the wheel of development to start getting the world to address all these issues. The G20 is an agglomeration of some of the big economy countries in the world. They account for a massive GDP number, and just to get them to come together to agree that they will agree on the reform of the financial institutions like the World Bank, the IMF, and also to agree on continuing forward with multilateralism so that we do not have a unipolar world, that we have a multipolar world, and where, for instance, on the outcomes that we want to see in terms of financing renewable energy or climate change rather, and how, for instance, we would like disasters to be properly financed. This for us is an important ambition as we face, as I said earlier, recurring disasters. So in time, the people who live on the eastern seaboard, in KZN, in the Eastern Cape, in the Southern Cape, who continue to suffer from climate change damage, we're hoping that through the decisions that will be taken, we'll then be able to get finance that is going to assist us with rebuilding. And obviously, we're also doing this for our own continent, for countries in the global south, but more particularly for Africa, that in the end, there should be agreement on how countries that are suffering from a high debt burden can get cheaper loans to address their own developmental agendas. Now, all these matters do take time, as many others that have been decided by the G20 do take time. For instance, in Brazil, the decision was taken to target the 3,000 richest people in the world and to levy a tax on them. Now, that was agreed, and that work is now underway. It will admittedly take some time before it is finally put into place. But in the end, the taxation of those people will lead to higher taxes for the countries where they live, and in the end, it will result in development finance being present. So we, as South Africa, being positioned as a country that is hosting the G20 for the first time, we should be pleased that it positions our country as a very important country from an influence point of view, because we are up there with the many other nations, and we're able to influence decisions that will be taken by various multilateral organizations in the world. And as it is now, because we are G20 president, our views, our opinions are sought, and our word is heeded and listened to. So these are some of the key benefits that position our country at the top level of countries that operate in the world. And more so for us, it was more to focus on Africa and to focus on the global south, which has broadly been accepted, and also to focus on the Africa Continental Free Trade Area and to convince various countries that are part of the G20 that South Africa remains the gateway into the rest of the African continent, where if they want to set up operations, we are an investable destination. So from an investment point of view, it also showcases our country. It gives us an opportunity to talk about South Africa. And in fact, in all the meetings that have been held, all our ministers and our deputy ministers have done nothing but to showcase South Africa. And as we have held these meetings, we've taken them to places that showcase our country as well. And that has brought tourism in and will also bring future tourism. So the benefits are, can be multiplied in many ways. To say this will be the one thing that everyone will benefit from would be false on my part. But it's general benefit, and it's a good opportunity that we have. It's an opportunity that may only befall us or come to us possibly 20 years again from now. So we need to make good use of this opportunity that we have, being the first African country to be a G20 president and being in a very good position, having inherited the position from Brazil, a global South country, and handing over to the United States, a northern country which is a superpower and the biggest economy in the world. So we are well positioned, and I do believe that that gives us clout, that gives us an opportunity to be able to mobilize a number of things that can benefit our country. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
The second supplementary question will be asked by the Honourable the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I beg leave to remain seated. Mr. President, don't you find it strategic and indeed necessary to influence the G20 to dissect this undesirable attitude of the United States against some countries in the world? Consequently, are there any plans in place by South Africa to influence the G20 summit to put on the agenda the current regressive attitude by the United States against South Africa and other progressive countries? If not, don't you think South Africa must just focus rather on cementing economic ties with BRICS countries and other progressive countries in the global south and excuse itself from global bodies in which the US is part of the main driving force? I thank you.
The Honourable President.
Thank you, Honourable Deputy Speaker. South Africa continues to participate in a multitude of multilateral organizations. And in doing so, we always insist that a multipolar world is much more advantageous than a unipolar world, where the might of one country means right and means that they can dominate other countries. And we participate because we do always advocate the interests of our continent, and of course the interests of our own country and continent and the global south. And we are highly respected around the world for doing precisely that. And even as we participate in meetings, for instance, of the G7, where we are invited for their outreach program, we always articulate the views of the African continent and the global south. And being a member of the G20, we are able to do so as being a rightful member, and our voice is heard. And of course, you will know that as part of all this, we are members of BRICS, And some members of the G20 are also in BRICS, such as India, Brazil, and China. They are members of BRICS, and in BRICS, we are a collection of fairly progressive countries that have a particular set of values that bring us together. And just yesterday, as I said, we held a BRICS summit in which all the leaders of the BRICS family participated and took decisions that are aimed at consolidating what we have and leading us to even improving the manner in which we trade, the manner in which we respond to challenges, and how we should strengthen the multilateral system. All of us, as one, spoke about how we strengthen the United Nations and how we strengthen the World Trade Organization, the World Health Organization. Now, these organizations are organizations that many other countries participate in, including the United States. And we then take decisions to be the voices of reason, the voices of progressiveness, notwithstanding that they also participate. And we have the view that we cannot extract ourselves from those types of organizations by virtue of the fact that the US participates. We should participate and be able to exchange views and exchange opinions with them. And obviously with the hope that our views will win the day because they're based on good values, they're based on progressive principles. But to answer your questions more directly, yes, we are strengthening BRICS, and we are relying on BRICS to be the country, to be the organization that will consolidate our own standing and our own values. BRICS already, from a population point of view, is already half of the world population and accounts for between 30 to 40% of world trade. And that basically means that it's a very strong collection of countries that in time will continue to have a strong influence in what happens, not only in the G20, but also in the world. And in the G20 process, we've got a good number of countries that are very progressive, that see eye to eye with what we believe in. And we will be able to keep on pushing that agenda, because our agenda is aimed at advancing the interests of humanity and making sure that ordinary people lead a better life. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
The third supplementary question will be asked by the Honourable Radebe.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Your Excellency, I would like to know what legacy projects or initiatives are being developed as part of South Africa's G20 presidency to ensure lasting developmental impact beyond 2025. Thank you.
The Honourable President.
Thank you, Honourable Deputy Speaker. We have a number of projects that are being worked on that will see full fruition when we get to the Leaders' Summit. We are, through the various departments that we have in government, have been looking very closely at certain projects, and some of which will, the temptation is always you go for a legacy project at the region where the Leaders' Summit is going to be, like we've seen in many other parts of the world. But we want it to be a much more broad-based type of legacy projects that will, our people will then be able to say, this is what we had the G20, and this is what has been left behind. So a number of such projects are now in the works, and some of them are reaching a level of fruition, and we will be able to talk about them in time. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
The last supplementary question will be asked by the Honourable Ghana.
Nakenza Mtromoshtul, Ngensungla Navela Bafana all the best tonight against Nigeria. So we are playing Nigeria. Namonhla President. President, so lekaya lel pare dzani. Parno loko hi amukela vayeni. Kuna mafulufulu ku tirhiwa vusiku na nhlikani. Mara endzhaka loko vayeni va fambile, we go back to the default settings. So at the moment, when you drive through the G20 route, there's so much work that's happening. But I know, as we have seen with the World Cup, that after the hosting of the G20, we go back to the default setting. Se va ri ni mbutisa leswi President, ku ri mi ta endla njhani ku ri matirhelo lama, magingirikelo lama, hi ma vonaka nkarhi wa sweswi, ya ya mahlweni after G20, not this thing coming to an end, all this 24-hour work coming to an end because now the visitors have left our country.
The Honourable President.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. No, na cancer sunen ni na ilava ku ri bafana ba wina nyamutlha ba tlanga na tiko leri ri tikaku, and Nigeria i tshama i vonisa xipuku, so i lava ku va vonisa xipuku namuntlha, so ni khense ngopfu. No, u vula ntiyiso hi ku minkarhi yo tala loko ku ta vayeni na le makaya swi endleka tani, loko ti va ku ri ku ta muyeni a nga va mukhwenyana, a nga va president, a nga va member of parliament, loko a fika swakudya a ku dyiwa swakudya swa kahle swinene, na jareti ta cleaniwa kahle, na timbyana ti ta bohiwa ku ri ti nga vonaki. It's natural, swi endleka tani all over. And when visitors come, we spruce up, we clean up, but when visitors are gone, we revert back to our usual practices. You are absolutely right. And there are concerns also about precisely that in areas where these meetings are happening. But what I have seen is that where we've held some of the meetings, people cleaned up, people put everything right, and they've continued even post the meeting because they use that as an incentive to get better. And I'm hoping that where we are going to have, for instance, the Leaders Summit in Johannesburg, and we've been putting a lot of pressure on Johannesburg itself, that Johannesburg must pick itself up from what it is. And it should not only be because the Leaders Summit is coming to Johannesburg. It must be because it should be done. I took time to talk to the mayor and explain to him that one time as I was traveling around, I saw how even the driveways, even the roads were really in a terrible and sorry state, with weeds along the path and with the rails having been damaged, and paper all over and dirt. And I painted that picture to the mayor and I said, this must end. We must deliver a better looking Johannesburg, and it must not only be done for the G20, it must be done beyond the G20. So he sat there and listened. And he said, Mr. President, I want you to come and measure us in a month's time. So that's precisely what I'm going to do. So we're going to see whether Johannesburg gets better. But the point that you made, nisitwe kahle, ita endla ku ri vanhu va endla sure ku ri loko vavhaki va fambile swilo swi tshama swi sasekile ku ya mahlweni so hi ta endla tani swi saseka ku fana na wena hi ku saseke swinene
We now move on to question number 17, which has been asked by the Honourable Trollip. Order members. The question is whether the Cabinet intends to approve a constitutional amendment bill to abolish the position of deputy ministers, given the amount of money spent on salaries, travel and VIP protection, and if not, whether the position of deputy ministers will be retained as a means of patronage that takes high priority over the needs of the unemployed, hungry and hopeless. The Honourable President.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Speaker. Since the advent of our democracy in 1994, deputy ministers have played an important role in assisting ministers in the performance of their functions and responsibilities. The Constitution provides for the appointment of deputy minister to assist the members of the executive. According to the Constitution, deputy ministers are accountable to Parliament for the exercise of their powers and the performance of their functions. Ministers and their respective deputy ministers agree on the delegation of responsibility in certain areas of work in terms of departmentals' annual performance plans, ensuring that there is consistent political attention and oversight. In announcing appointments to the National Executive following the May elections last year, I indicated that due to the need to ensure that the National Executive is inclusive of all parties that are part of the GNU, it was not possible to reduce the number of portfolios, for instance, in the executive. We have sought to ensure that the National Executive is representative of the people of South Africa, giving due consideration to gender, youth, demographics, and regional distribution. Deputy ministers appointed in June last year continue to add value to the work of the government and to support the meaningful way the implementation of the priorities of the seventh administration. Now, yes, we are always concerned about the size of the executive, as we are also concerned about the size of deputy ministers. You may recall that right at the beginning when we constituted this government, we did address this issue and said that my own wish was that we should have a much smaller executive. That has always been my declared wish, but the need to accommodate various parties that are part of the GNU, resulted in us having the size of the executive that we have now. All my colleagues in the GNU accepted that, yes, it would have been ideal to have a much smaller executive. However, the need to have a GNU which is properly representative meant that we needed to have the type of architecture that we have. Now, it is an architecture which I believe works. I have seen how the various ministers and deputy ministers go about executing their tasks, and it is what we have, and we need to keep the government moving forward with the type of architecture that we have right now. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
First supplementary question will be asked by the Honourable Trollip.
Thank you, Honourable Deputy Speaker. Honourable President, you're the steward of South Africa. And despite your so-called wish that your cabinet would be smaller, it has grown like topsy. You didn't cut any of the ANC positions, you just added GNU, Kapezu. You have recently appointed, I need protection.
Order, honourable members.
Honourable President, you recently appointed an acting Minister of Police who incidentally says there's no such constitutional provision. He's the Minister of Police because you couldn't promote two of the deputies. You didn't trust them to become ministers. You also fired the Deputy Minister for Trade and Industry and Competition 75 days ago, and that position still remains vacant. These two examples illustrate just how insignificant and redundant these positions are. Stewardship, Mr. President, is well explained in the book of Matthew, where three of the minister's servants were given 10, 5, and 1 bags of gold to look after. Two of them increased the value of what they were given, and they were rewarded. One buried what they were given and was rebuked. Why are you burying what you've been entrusted with by maintaining such a costly, bloated, and ineffective cabinet? Will you and your party support my private member's bill, constitutional amendment, to do away with deputy ministers so that the cost of these redundant members can be redirected to the betterment of our country? Simple question. Will you support it? It's coming. Will you support the private member's bill? If you want a smaller cabinet.
The Honourable President. Honourable Trollip, your time has expired. The Honourable President.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. What Honourable Trollip is saying sounds like a threat. So my response to that, rather than say I don't respond to threats, is the following. My response is I would really like to look at that bill. I think please have the bill forwarded so that we look at it. I'm not able to respond in any way whatsoever until I see the contents of the bill. Now, therefore, much as I said, it sounds like a threat. It isn't a threat. No, I want to actually compliment you and say, I don't see it as a threat. I see it as a very meaningful contribution because you are concerned, as I am, of the size of our executive. And the size of the executive we now have is a result of the outcome of our elections, where we had to put together a government of national unity with 10 political parties that sat down and negotiated the structure of the government we have. Now, whether we like it or not, it is what we have. Ideally, Honourable Trollip, I would want a much smaller executive. I would also like fewer deputy ministers. But right now, we do have deputy ministers who are really putting shoulder to the wheel, who are going even beyond what I would call the call of duty. And those deputy ministers are distinguishing themselves as real contributors to our governance. And what I also really am appreciating is the fact that many of our deputy ministers are working so well with their minister colleagues. So,
Order, honourable members. Order. Mr. President, please. Honourable President, please take your seat. Honourable Matiase, on what point are you rising?
Deputy Speaker, on a point of being mischievous,
Honorable Matiasi, that is not a point of order. Please take your seat.
The
Honorable-
president is deliberately twisting facts, misleading the public. Madiba says a man who, depending on who listens,
Honorable Matiasi,
changes his message.
Honorable Matiasi, you are not
Changes
now
his message.
making a
He's
speech.
the man who cannot
Please take your seat,
lead-
Honorable Matiasi.
He's the man
Please
who cannot
take your-
lead our nation.
Please take your seat.
He's the man who cannot
Honorable Matiasi,
lead our nation.
please take your seat. That is not a point of order. Honorable President, please proceed.
Honorable Deputy Speaker, I think I've responded to the question and have given the reasons why we continue to have the size of the executive that we have, as well as why we have the deputy ministers. And I have said that it remains a wish and, in the end, an objective that we should have an executive. And I've said it here a number of times, but this time round, it was given rise to by the outcome of our elections, where we needed to set up a government of national unity. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
The second supplementary question will be asked by the Honorable Ligaraba.
ndo livhuwa muthusa mulangadzulo. Honorable President, given that deputy ministers play a crucial role in supporting ministers and contributing to oversight and coordination of government departments, despite not having executive authority, can the President elaborate on how their advisory and coordination functions enhances the effectiveness of government ministries, also recognizing that they participate in cabinet committees and support the district development model as champion? If possible, President, can you also outline specific examples or successes where deputy ministers have effectively contributed to policy implementation, departmental oversight, and stakeholder engagement, thereby justifying their continued existence?
Thank you, Honourable Member. Your time has expired. The Honourable President.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker and honorable members. Yes, deputy ministers continue to play a critical role in our governance. They are members of the executive. They participate in cabinet committee discussions. I'd like to believe that we have a really wonderful system that functions so well that every proposal that finally sees its light of day in cabinet goes through rigorous processes, starting off in the department, where the minister and deputy minister will engage in discussions with their directors general and deputy directors general to put forward a proposal or a proposition that could lead to a project, or that could lead to an amendment of a law or a structuring of a policy. That then goes to the directors general, forum of directors general, to be thoroughly discussed across the various departments. That then ends up going to the cluster.
Yeah, I've raised my hand.
The cluster that we have.
Honourable President, if you would just allow me a second. Honourable members, please keep your microphones muted and do not interrupt the proceedings. Mr. President, please proceed.
When it goes to the clusters, deputy ministers also participate in those discussions, and thereafter it goes to cabinet committees, the various clusters of cabinet committees, where deputy ministers participate vigorously in the crafting of policy, of proposals, or even the drafting of laws. Whereafter it then goes to cabinet, where cabinet collectively then examines what will have gone through this sausage machine, if you like, where a proper decision is then taken. Now, the value of having cabinet ministers is clearly demonstrated in this whole process. It starts at the department level and it goes forward to the cluster level and the cabinet committee level, where they engage with other deputy ministers and ministers on the crafting of any position that should lead to either a change or an enhancement of a proposition. So cabinet deputy ministers do play a very critical role. Honorable member, you ask if I can give you any concrete example. I can give you many, but standing here, I would only be able to give you a few and leave out others. But they are all participating in a meaningful way in governance. They are participating in the execution of decisions. They assist ministers, and where ministers are not able to act on a particular project or initiative, deputy minister.
You must recognize my hand, please, Deputy Speaker.
Honourable President, could you please take your seat? Honourable Skosana, please state the point that you are now rising on.
Ngiyathokoza, Deputy Speaker. Elami ngithi Speaker, uPresident uyasichewa, uyasirareja, akaphendula imibuzo.
Honourable Skosana, that is not a point of order. It is now being frivolous and you are interrupting proceedings. We will now continue. Honourable President, please proceed.
Thank you, Honourable Deputy Speaker. With those words, I have answered the question that the Honourable member raised. I see the real value of deputy ministers, if truth be told, and I appreciate the inputs and the commitment that they demonstrate. And in many ways, deputy ministers' positions can also be seen as training ground for future ministerial positions. That's how I look at it. So they are doing a good job, and we may not see the value that they do. I see great value. Thank you very much.
Third supplementary question will be asked by the Honourable Kwankwa.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. President, the crux of the problem here, it's a no-brainer that deputy ministers play an important role in supporting the work of ministers in terms of departmental oversight and the programmatic work of government. However, President, do you not think in light of their assigned responsibilities that the time has come to make the performance agreements of deputy ministers public once they've been entered into, that they too face parliamentary scrutiny on the work they do in support of the government and the political principles, especially when it comes to managing the political bureaucratic interface? Learning from other jurisdictions where such measures have been put in place, like Canada and elsewhere, has the time not come for us to actually make it transparent and clear upfront what to expect from a specific deputy minister, rather than leave it up to chance and leave it to the relationship between the minister and the deputy? Because the ZPA are buying.
The Honourable President.
Thank you, Honourable Deputy Speaker. I would like to agree with Honourable Kwankwa. Thank you.
Last supplementary question will be asked by the Honourable Khadebe.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Your Excellency, my question is, considering that ministers within the Government of National Unity are often overstretched with the workload of managing various tasks within their departments, Deputy ministers have proven invaluable in assisting ministers with executing their mandates. Has consideration been given to expanding the roles and the responsibilities of deputy ministers in ensuring better continuity and succession, particularly when ministers are abroad or unavailable? Thank you.
The Honourable President.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Speaker. Yes, I'm glad that at least there are some in this House who recognize the important role that is played by deputy ministers. So thank you very much. Yes, as I said, deputy ministers play a critical role, and that role that they play should be more accentuated in a way where they should be given even more responsibility. The constitution of our country invests in a minister a particular role, which is quite special. And for instance, when a minister is absent, the protocol that we have is that another minister who has sworn the oath to act as a minister is then asked to participate in that. And I don't see that as a drawback at all, because ministers are not often away for too long anyway. And when there is clear sharing of tasks and clear areas of responsibility, it should not impede the deputy minister's ability to act and to execute some of the work that should be done. I must, however, say that there has in the past been challenges, and some of them have either been personal or on issues where they may not have seen eye to eye on issues. But right now, we are fortunate, or I'm fortunate, that many of the deputy ministers are working very well with their ministers. And where there are issues, we do intervene to assist and to give support on an ongoing basis. And because you are dealing with people, you will always have situations where they butt heads. And in the end, the role that we play is to try to ameliorate all that. But so far, it's working very well. But the points that you have made and the points that Honorable Nkwankwa also made are points that are very cogent, which I would like to take into account as we move forward. Thank you.
Honourable members, the last question has been asked by the Honourable Chauke Adonis. The question is, given that the Gender-Based Violence and Femicide Act number 9 of 2024 establishes a National Council on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide, but only 5 million rand has been made available for the interim secretariat, what plans does the government have in place to ensure that the council will soon be functional with enough budget and all the necessary support to carry out its work optimally? The Honourable President.
Honorable Deputy Speaker and honorable members, it is vital that the National Council on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide is established with the authority and resources that are outlined in the Act. I feel a bit disappointed that this council has not yet been established in a way that it will take on the task that was envisaged when the National Strategic Plan was crafted. I saw that as I embraced the National Strategic Plan, I saw the role of the Council being the one that is going to help us as South Africans to bring down the incidence of gender-based violence. So it remains a huge disappointment to me that this Council has not really been set up. Now, the interim allocation of 5 million for the Secretariat is a transitional measure enabling the coordination of the implementation of the National Strategic Plan Against Gender-Based Violence and Femicide. To ensure that the National Council is able to fulfill its critical functions, National Treasury has approved the Council as a separate sub-program with ring-fence funding from the 1st of April 2026. The Council is planned for establishment, as I'm told, from the 1st of April 2026 following due processes. Due processes, in my view, that have taken an inordinately long time. Ministers have nominated government representatives to the Council, and the relevant portfolio committee in the National Assembly will call for civil society and private sector nominations. And I would like this to be speeded up so that the process of establishing the Council should really get underway. The board will appoint the CEO and the secretariat staff, draft regulations to coordinate the provincial as well as the local gender-based violence and femicide structures are being developed. The strength of the National Strategic Plan lies in mobilizing multiple stakeholders and mainstreaming the work of these stakeholders across government and ensuring that each department of government has its own work cut out when it comes to gender-based violence or addressing gender-based violence. Every government department and entity is expected to contribute to the implementation of the National Strategic Plan within its mandate, while the National Council provides leadership and oversight. All relevant government departments have dedicated funds towards the implementation of these pillars of the strategic plan that fall within their respective areas of responsibility. While the work to establish the National Council is underway, the implementation of the National Strategic Plan is proceeding. For example, the gender-based violence and femicide net joints established in April has strengthened government-wide coordination. Awareness campaigns, school and university interventions are ongoing, whilst the National Council is being set up. Sexual offences courts, Tutuzela care centers, and GBV desks are operational nationwide. Psychosocial support and integrated services are provided through the Department of Social Development. Kuseleka one-stop centers and GBV command center are also set up. There is also progress with economic empowerment, mainly through improving the access of women-owned businesses to procurement opportunities in both government and also in the private sector. Now, these initiatives should show that the National Strategic Plan is a living framework that in many ways is being implemented, but needs much more tighter implementation through the establishment of the National Council. The Council is expected, once operational, to accelerate this process through stronger oversight, coordination, as well as accountability. And accountability will come from the fact that it will have a budget that it will be able to oversee to ensure that it executes the tasks that we foresee. Gender-based violence and femicide is a stain on the conscience of our nation. The National Council is an important instrument in strengthening our response to this epidemic, ensuring that all South Africans are properly mobilized to ensure that this scourge of violating the rights of women and children is brought to an end. We now do have an instrument that is emerging, and I wish it had been set up as we brought the matter here to Parliament, but we do have the various other substructures that are already functioning. What we now need to do is to make sure that the Council is set up, the budget is going to be ready and able to support its work. and the accountability process will then be set in place, and also oversight, particularly when it comes to what we do in government. Because the reason why we felt we needed a National Council is for the National Council to have a proper oversight of what we are doing in council through every department of government. The word we have given to every department of government is that we must together be involved in the fight against gender-based violence within government and also in society, and support various efforts that are being taken by various formations throughout the country to fight gender-based violence. And the Council will enable us to see this as a national task involving all of us. And it will also help to give a real powerful face to what needs to be done by all of us in the country when that Council is put in place. So a lot of work awaits this Council. And as I say once again, I'm rather disappointed that it has taken this long to establish this Council. But as always, some of these things do take time, but we should be pleased that they do happen in the end. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
The first supplementary question will be asked by the Honourable Chauke Adunis.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and Honourable greetings, revolutionary greetings to our Honourable Cyril Ramaphosa in our midst. My question centered around this, and I appreciate that there is reassurance that there will be ring-fenced financing for the GBVF Council. Now, South Africa plays quite an instrumental role globally in ensuring that we're able to have global influence. GBV being one of the pandemics that we're faced with globally and not only locally. How does the president look to utilize South Africa's influence globally on ensuring that we're able to impact on curbing the GBV crisis that is faced globally and by other countries, but additionally utilizing the NCGBVF model in order for us to utilize it as a platform, but also as a pillar to lead when it comes to curbing the crisis of gender-based violence across the globe. And most importantly, it would be, how does the president look to utilize his presidency also in the G20 to ensure that we're able to greatly have influence towards empowering those who are victims of gender-based violence and femicide? Thank you very much.
The Honourable President.
Thank you, Honourable Deputy Speaker. Yes, we utilize our position as South Africa to be the voice on talking about gender-based violence. At times we believe that we bear the greatest burden when it comes to gender-based violence, which we declared a pandemic. And to this end, wherever we can and whenever we can, we become part of structures that make us focus more on gender-based violence and also spread the message. For instance, in Africa, our own continent, we've continued to advocate the position of having to fight against gender-based violence and participate in various UN structures and committees. At a global level, even at a UN level, we participate in various structures that not only deal with the issue of gender-based violence, but the broader issue of also promoting the health of women and children and adolescents, which are very much a part of the whole ecosystem of having to deal with the challenges that the women of our country face. So we are, even in the G20, have structured an issue on the issue of solidarity, that our solidarity value must also be about caring for ordinary people and caring for the interests of women, of children and adolescents, and also caring for them from a health point of view. So our position is not only national, it is broader than just being national. It is a message that we do believe should be spread more strongly around our own continent as well as around the world. Thank you, Honorable Deputy Speaker.
Second supplementary question will be asked by the Honourable Khanile.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. Mr. President, in 2022, you promised the nation, but women in particular, to establish a National Council on Gender-Based Violence. 2 years later, this council exists only on paper, but also exists as a broken promise. Mr. President, have you deprioritized GBV as a final act of humiliation to every victim and survivor of gender-based violence?
The Honourable President.
Thank you, Honourable Deputy Speaker. If you heard me carefully, right from the beginning of my reply, I expressed my disappointment, and it is deep disappointment on my part, that this council has not yet been set up. And it has not yet been set up because the structuring thereof was such that this House has had a role to play. And if there was a time when I wished I was a dictator, this would have been the time where I would have set up the council on my own, and this council would have started working way before 2022. Because when the women of our country marched on the union buildings, was it in 2018, and insisted that we should hold a summit. I agreed that we should hold a summit. They marched to the union buildings. I was told at 9 o'clock that they are there. Before going to sleep, I was told that the women say they are not going to leave the union buildings until you come. So I got into the car, I went to the union buildings, I met them, and I gave them the promise that we would hold a summit, which we did. It was a very successful summit where on their own, I just convened it, and on their own, listen, I convened it, and on their own, they decided what needs to be done. It was a dialogue. It was the dialogue of the women of our country. Others did not come, others stayed away, but the dialogue went on. And others came beside the caravan and it stopped. They climbed in and the dialogue was held. The dialogue ended up with a national strategic plan, which strategic plan said there must be a council that will be set up. And obviously to give it the authority and the positioning of being a state institution, it had to be legislated here. And you as legislators decided that you are going to set up this council. And my wish would have been I should set it up because we would have moved on. But because you are averse to having a dictator, which is a good thing, you have delayed in setting up this council. So much as I am to blame for many things, for everything that happens in the country, this is one area, my dear honorable sister, I am not to blame for. And that is why I say I am disappointed that this council has not yet been set up, because it detracts from the promise I made to the women of this country in terms of dealing with GBV. I've been an ardent speaker and campaigner on GBV, and I will continue doing so and getting our men and getting our men to treat the women of our country with respect and with honor. Thank you very much.
Third supplementary question will be asked by the Honourable Mohammed.
Mr. President, the GBVF Act came into effect in November 2024. Yet by mid-2025, the National Council is still incomplete, with civil society and private sectors seats vacant. In just one quarter, 966 women and 314 children were murdered, while shelters collapsed from funding delays and where SAPS has even omitted GBV data from its crime stats. Perpetrators still continue to walk free on bail, further eroding trust in the justice system. If GBV is a pandemic, as you just said, why is your response so nonchalant? Are you once again shocked? What is your excuse for not having tabled a ring-fence costed plan with quarterly milestones for survivor services, provincial structures, credible SAPS GBV reporting, and bail reforms, in such a manner that makes this law to be not just symbolic while women and children continue to die? Thank you.
The Honourable President.
I am not shocked. I am just disappointed that this structure has not been set up. And this parliament should have played its role in setting up this structure. And this structure would have then inspired the work that needs to be done, including ensuring that the budgets are in place, because it is this structure, this parliament that sets out budgets. And it is this parliament that should be calling for accountability, whether it is from the police reporting on GBV or whether it is the programs that need to be embarked upon. Yes, money can be allocated, but the structure that has to be put in place should be set up first, because Treasury is ready, willing, and prepared to finance the work that needs to be done. The work continues to be done, as I said, through various of our departments, and every department and every minister, and I'm going to be even insisting more on each of our ministers to make it clear that gender-based violence becomes a priority in their activities. So work is being done, and I do want this parliament to move with maximum speed to make sure that this council is set up. And if you, as parliamentarians, can act quicker, then this work of the gender-based violence will move at maximum speed. Thank you, Honourable Deputy Speaker.
Last supplementary question will be asked by the Honourable Mente Nkuna.
Oh, thanks so much, Deputy Speaker. Mr. President, we have noted your expression of frustration right from the start of your response. But let me remind you, Mr. President, that the main impediment towards getting the council to do its work is chronic underfunding, which makes it impossible for instance, to appoint members who come from civil society organization if there are no guarantees that they will be paid. Considering the crisis level of gender-based violence and femicide in this country, and the several commitments you have made towards the fight against GBV and femicide, do you not consider your failure to fully institutionalize the National Council on GBV as a betrayal of women's safety in this country? If not, what measurable commitments do you make to the women of this country in relation to the functioning of the National Council on GBV? My name is Honourable Mahlala. Sorry for that.
Thank you, Honourable Mahlala. Honourable President.
Honourable Deputy Speaker and Honourable Mahlala, the commitment that I would make is that I have passed on the message to members of this body to get on with the process of appointing the council. because Honorable Matlala, once the structure is in place, the Minister of Finance now has the authority, with your allowance, with your permission, to allocate the funding that should finance the work of the council. The minister will not be able to do so unless Parliament plays its own role. Now, yes, I said, I am responsible for everything that goes wrong, but not this one. Please, not this one. Untshwarele mo, kopo untshwarele, tse ding kaofela aowa, ke tla dumela. Empa ena aowa, a se nna, ke a gana ka nnete. E ke lona. Yaanong, I want all of you, as you always say to me, what do you always say, Mr. President? Don't you think you have been derelict in executing your duties? Now, I want all of you to agree that all of you, you've been derelict in executing your jobs. And I would like to see, yeah. So I'll stand outside there and shake each one's hand and say, do you agree that you have been derelict? Honorable Deputy Speaker, that to me really should add to the urgency of setting up this National Council. And I can say that the budgets will be there and people who will serve on the council will be assisted to do their work, because this is important work. It's a national project that this seventh administration is committed to ensuring that it is executed. So with those words, and thank you very much, Honorable Deputy Speaker.
Honourable members, that concludes questions to the President. I thank the Honourable President. Honourable members, before I request members to stand, I would also just